In a statement released on Saturday, the Coptic Church said it excused itself from hosting Mike Pence when he visits Egypt, citing U.S. President Donald Trump's decision made at an unsuitable time and without consideration for the feelings of millions of people. Egypt's Coptic Church said it would pray for wisdom and to address all issues that impact peace for the people of the Middle East. The decision comes a day after Egypt's top Muslim cleric Ahmed alTayeb also refused to meet Pence. The Coptic Pope's decision comes a day after Egypt's top Muslim cleric Ahmed alTayeb also refused to meet Pence Egyptian Coptic Christians, the largest religious minority in the region, make up about 10% of the country's 93 million people. Solidarity from non-Muslim Arabs. The Coptic Pope's refusal to host Pence is largely symbolic but significant, because it demonstrates the Arab solidarity for Palestinians irrespective of religious affiliations. Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem has not only been criticized by Muslim countries. Germany, China and Russia are among scores of nations that have slammed the U.S. president over the policy U-turn. The status of Jerusalem was a key stumbling block during previous peace negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, in particular the question of how to divide sovereignty and oversee holy sites. Read more. Jerusalem. 3 things to know. Intifadas. What you need to know. While Israel regards Jerusalem as its capital, a majority of the international community rejects that claim, saying the city's status should be settled in peace talks with the Palestinians. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said Saturday it would take several years before the U.S. opens an embassy in Jerusalem. According to the Old Testament, David, king of the 2 partial kingdoms of Judah and Israel, conquered Jerusalem from the Jebusites around 1000 BC. He moved his seat of government to Jerusalem, making it the capital and religious center of his kingdom. The Bible says David's son Solomon built the first temple for Yahweh, the God of Israel. Jerusalem became the center of Judaism. The Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II, third from the left, conquered Jerusalem in 597 and again in 586 BC, as the Bible says. He took King Jehoiakim V from the right and the Jewish upper class into captivity, sent them to Babylon and destroyed the temple. After Persian King Cyrus the Great seized Babylon, he allowed the exiled Jews to return home to Jerusalem and to rebuild their temple. Since the year 63 CE, Jerusalem was under Roman rule. Resistance movements rapidly formed amongst the population, so that in 66 CE, the First Jewish-Roman War broke out. The war ended 4 years later, with a Roman victory and a renewed destruction of the Temple in Jerusalem. The Romans and Byzantines ruled Palestine for approximately 600 years. Over the course of the Islamic conquest of Greater Syria, Muslim armies also reached Palestine. By order of the Caliph Umar in the picture, Jerusalem was besieged and captured in the year 637 CE. In the following era of Muslim rule, various mutually hostile and religiously divided rulers presided over the city. Jerusalem was often besieged and changed hands several times. From 1070 CE onward, the Muslim Seljuk rulers increasingly threatened the Christian world. Pope Urban II finally called for the crusade. A total of 5 crusades set out to conquer Jerusalem within 200 years. In 1244, however, the Crusaders finally lost control of the city and it once again fell under Muslim rule. After the conquest of Egypt and Arabia by the Ottomans, Jerusalem became the administrative seat of an Ottoman administrative district in 1535. In its first decades of Ottoman rule, the city saw a clear revival. With a British victory over Ottoman troops in 1917, Palestine fell under British rule. Jerusalem went to the British without a fight. After World War II, the British gave up their Palestinian mandate. The UN voted for a division of the country in order to create a home for the survivors of the Holocaust. Some Arab states then went to war against Israel and conquered part of Jerusalem. Until 1967, the city was divided into an Israeli West and a Jordanian East. In 1967, Israel waged the Six-Day War against Egypt, Jordan and Syria. Israel took control of the Sinai, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the Golan Heights and East Jerusalem. Israeli paratroopers gained access to the Old City and stood at the Wailing Wall for the first time since 1949. East Jerusalem is not officially annexed, but rather integrated into the administration. Israel has not denied Muslims access to its holy places. The Temple Mount is under an autonomous Muslim administration. Muslims can enter, visit the Dome of the Rock and the adjacent Al-Aqsa Mosque and pray there. Jerusalem remains to this day an obstacle to peace between Israel and Palestine. In 1980, Israel declared the whole city its eternal and indivisible capital. After Jordan gave up its claim to the West Bank and East Jerusalem in 1988, the State of Palestine was proclaimed. Palestine also declares, in theory, Jerusalem as its capital. Author Ines Isiel anger against U.S. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will also not participate in a planned meeting with Pence later this month. There will be no meeting with the Vice President of America in Palestine, Majdi al-Khaldi, a Palestinian diplomatic advisor, told AFP news agency. The United States has crossed all the red lines with the Jerusalem decision, he added. Washington had warned Thursday that canceling the meeting would be counterproductive for peace in the region. But Abbas has been under tremendous pressure over the Jerusalem decision. Jibril Rajoub, a senior member of Abbas' Fatah party, said Pence was not welcome in Palestine. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urged protesters Saturday to remain calm over Trump's recognition of Jerusalem. The fate of Jerusalem cannot be left to an occupying state that usurped Palestinian land since 1967. With no regard to law and morality, Erdogan said, adding that reactions to the situation should be within democratic and legal bounds. Protests and airstrikes. Palestinian protests against Trump's announcement continued on Saturday. On Friday, at least 2 people were killed and 760 were injured in clashes between Palestinian protesters and Israeli forces in Jerusalem, Gaza and the West Bank. Israeli airstrikes killed at least 2 people on Saturday after targeting military facilities in the Gaza Strip allegedly linked to the armed wing of the Islamist group Hamas. Militant groups operating in the Gaza Strip launched missiles into Israel on Friday amid mass protests and clashes against U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital earlier this week. There have been Palestine solidarity rallies in many Muslim countries, including Egypt, Iran, Jordan, Lebanon, Pakistan and Turkey. Read more. Palestinian youth fight to defend right to Jerusalem as capital. The militant al-Qaeda network urged its supporters the world over to target key interests of the U.S. and its allies, in response to Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. A Palestinian protester hurls stones toward Israeli police during clashes near the Jewish settlement of Beit Al, close to the West Bank city of Ramallah. Palestinians called for a day of rage in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. At least 2 protesters were killed on Friday during clashes with security forces. Jerusalem itself has seen some of the largest protests, as here in front of the Dome of the Rock Islamic shrine at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in the Old City. Hundreds of additional police were deployed to control the masses of protesters after Palestinian calls for protests after Friday prayers. And those calls for protest have received a response from Shiite Muslims. In Iraq, these men have taken to the streets in the southern city of Basra. Palestinians are angry because they want East Jerusalem as the capital of their future state. Trump's move, supported by Israel, could thwart that desire. Indian-controlled Kashmir also saw protests, with Muslim men seen here burning Israeli and U.S. flags during a rally in Bujim, southwest of Srinagar. Protesters marched in several places in Srinagar and other parts of the region after Friday prayers, chanting slogans such as "Down with America" and "Down with Israel." In Malaysia, more than 1,000 Muslims protested outside the U.S. Embassy in Kuala Lumpur against Trump's decision. The protesters, led by Sports Minister Khairy Jamaluddin, marched from a nearby mosque after Friday prayers to the U.S. Embassy, halting traffic as they chanted "Long live Islam." These Turkish women are venting their anger in support of the Palestinian cause. But Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem has been condemned by many governments of non-Muslim countries as well. Protesters in Egypt burn a picture of U.S. President Donald Trump with his face crossed during a protest in front of the Syndicate of Journalists in Cairo. The picture reads, "Journalists are telling you Trump, Jerusalem is Arab." Hundreds of protesters also gathered in Al-Azhar Mosque and outside in its courtyard. In Jakarta, Indonesia, protesters in the world's most populous Muslim nation wear Palestine headbands. More than 300 protesters shouted "Go to hell, Israel," and called on Trump to stop his blind support for the Jewish state. The streets of the Iranian capital, Tehran, have also been a scene of huge protests at the U.S. decision. As an archenemy of Israel, the Iranian government is likely to view the U.S. move as particularly offensive. Germany has also seen protests, with mostly Muslim demonstrators attending a rally at Berlin's Brandenburg Gate while waving Palestinian and Turkish flags. The German government has been among those to warn urgently against Trump's move. Author Timothy Jones, SHSRCAFP, DPA, Reuters.